Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join with the Prime Minister in expressing sympathy and support to those that are victims of flooding, and thank you to the Environment Agency and all the emergency services that are doing their best to help people. Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are also with those who suffer from the coronavirus and also with the Chinese community in this country, who are, I'm sorry to say, facing increasingly alarming levels of racism within our country. And as this virus spreads, I also want to thank public health workers who are helping those affected and raising awareness about the danger of this virus. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister think that someone who came to this country at the age of 5 and was the victim of county lines grooming and compelled to carry drugs, released 5 years ago and never reoffended, deserves to be deported?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the whole country would agree that while I cannot comment on individual cases, it is entirely right that foreign national offenders should be deported from this country in accordance with the law.
Jeremy Corbyn.
The government has learned absolutely nothing from the Windrush scandal. This cruel and callous government is trying to mislead the British people into thinking it's solely deporting foreign nationals who are guilty of murder, rape and other very serious offences. This is clearly not the case. Take the example of a young black boy who came to the UK aged 5 and is now being deported after serving time for a drugs offence. If there was a case of a young white boy with blonde hair who later dabbled in Class A drugs and conspired with a friend to beat up a journalist, would he deport that boy? Or is it, Mr. Speaker, is it one rule for young black boys from the Caribbean and another for white boys from the United States?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think quite frankly that the right honourable gentleman demeans himself and, by the way, besmirches the reputation of the Windrush generation, who came to this country to work in our public services, to teach our children in this country, to make lives better for the people of this country. He has no right to conflate them with those foreign national offenders that we are deporting today.
Jeremy Corbyn.
The Windrush generation have been disgracefully treated by a government that deliberately created a hostile environment. And whilst the government was fighting to deport people who legally came to this country as children, the Foreign Secretary refused to tell the family of Harry Dunne the reason why the US is blocking the extradition of a woman who is alleged to have killed him. I now ask the Prime Minister straight this question. Is Anna Sacoolas being shielded from justice because she's a former CIA officer?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the whole House will know that not only the Foreign Secretary but I, and at every level of government, we have tirelessly sought the extradition of Anna Sacoolas for justice in this country, and we will continue to do so.
It is widely reported that Anna Sacoolas is in fact a CIA operative. Now we know that the Foreign Secretary misled the Dunn family, who are being denied justice by the US government. Will the Prime Minister commit to his removal from office tomorrow in his reshuffle?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman knows very well that the Foreign Office have been told that Anna Sacoolas was notified to the UK government as a spouse with no official role. And we will continue without fear or favour to seek justice for Harry Dunne and for his family. And we will continue to seek the extradition of Anna Sacoolas from the United States.
Jeremy Corbyn.
This morning, Charlotte Charles, Harry's mum, said, "We thought we'd bridged the gap with the government, but they've not been honest with us." Mr. Speaker, this is only the latest case of our country's one-sided extradition treaty with the USA. This lopsided treaty means the US can request extradition in circumstances that Britain cannot. While the US continues to deny justice to Harry Dunn, will the Prime Minister commit today to seek an equal and balanced extradition relationship with the United States?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, to be frank, I think the honourable gentleman has a point in his characterisation of our extradition arrangements with the United States, and I do think that there are elements of that relationship that are unbalanced, and I certainly think that it is worth looking at. But that is totally different from the case of Harry Dunn and Sacoolas, and we continue to seek the extradition of Sacoolas to face justice in this country.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, it's everything to do with the relationship with the USA that Anna Sacoolas has not been extradited back to Britain, because the US refuses to do it because of this lopsided treaty. I'm glad the Prime Minister at least acknowledges that. This deep disparity with the US is about to be laid bare when the courts decide whether the WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange will be extradited to the US on charges of espionage for exposing war crimes, the murder of civilians and large-scale corruption. Will the Prime Minister agree with the parliamentary report that's going to the Council of Europe that this extradition should be opposed and the rights of journalists and whistleblowers upheld for the good of all of us?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to comment on any individual case, but it is obvious that the rights of journalists and whistleblowers should be upheld, and this government will clearly continue to do that.